A new CBS News study shows minority voters are concerned over new voting rights. Some voters of color say many of the proposals currently up for debate will make it harder to cast their ballot. The study found many of those individuals took advantage of early voting and used ballot drop boxes in 2020. Meantime, most Americans are backing other changes like requiring a photo ID to vote and automatic voter registration. For more, I want to bring in Kabir Khanna. Kabir is CBS News' Deputy Director of Elections and Data Analytics. Great to have you on the show. First, let's talk about early voting. What does your analysis of this issue show, including how different types of voters feel?
Hi, Lana. Nice to see you. So we thought it was important to look at how voters felt about their experiences in 2020, as well as some hard data from public records and voter files on how different groups might be impacted by some of the new policies that are being passed by state legislatures or being debated in various states. One thing to keep in mind is that not only was there record turnout last year, but a record number of people voted before Election Day. About 7 in 10 voters did that, according to the census. And what we find is that voters generally oppose restrictions on early voting. So that opposition extends to two specific measures. One is shortening the amount of time that would be available to vote early in person. And also, there's opposition to limiting the number of drop boxes that are available to submit your absentee ballots. And these sentiments about specific measures mirrors a larger trend that we've seen in a lot of our survey data, which is that in general, people are hesitant to make big changes to how voting works in their state. Most actual voters in 2020, and those are people who we've validated as having voted by checking them against voter files, they tell us that their experience last year was actually very easy and that the process in their state isn't too hard or too easy, it's about right. So a hesitancy to make big changes to the voting process. However, there are important differences among different voting groups. So for example, Republicans are definitely more in favor of restrictions and making the process harder in the name of security, whereas Democrats, and particularly voters of color, express a lot of concern that these new restrictions are going to disproportionately impact them and make it harder for them to vote. And we see in our data that a lot of these specific policies garner more opposition from voters of color.
Right. I want to dig a little bit deeper into it because the survey also found that Black voters are most at risk when it comes to absentee voting restrictions. Can you explain for our viewers why that is?
Sure. A couple of reasons. One, Black voters are the most likely group to have voted by mail or absentee in 2020. About half of Black validated voters in our data did that. Another thing we see is that in some important states, not only were Black voters more likely to vote absentee, but their ballots were disproportionately rejected and their votes not counted. So for example, in Georgia, while Black voters were about a third of the electorate, they made up about half of rejected ballots. Another thing is that in some of these states, the push to limit absentee drop boxes are going to fall disproportionately on denser and frankly more democratic counties and areas of the state. So in Georgia, for example, a new rule says that there can only be one ballot drop box for every 100,000 voters in the county. That's not going to make a big difference in some of the smaller, more rural counties in the state, but in Metro Atlanta, they're going to go from having over 90 drop boxes last fall to just over 20 moving forward. So it's perhaps not surprising that in our survey data, we see that there's more opposition to limiting drop boxes among Black voters than there are among white voters, for example, Lana.
Well, one thing that I thought was also very interesting was that most Americans across party lines, age, and racial groups all support requiring a photo ID to vote, according to this data. Still, you mentioned that voters of color could be disproportionately affected by voter ID laws. Tell us more about this, and do you think, given that there is popular support for it, that this is likely going to be something that continues to become legislation in many states?
Yeah, I found this really interesting too, and I think this is an issue where sometimes the party activists are out of step with the party rank and file. We find that requiring a photo ID to vote is broadly popular, and that's a view that cuts across party lines. It's popular among around 8 in 10 Republicans and 8 in 10 Democrats and independents, and it's also supported across racial groups. It's closer to 7 in 10 Democrats and 8 in 10 independents. And I think part of the reason that is popular across racial groups and across parties is that the vast majority of adults in this country, and even more registered voters, about 97%, say that they have government-issued photo identification like a driver's license or a passport. So we're really talking about a small group that might be impacted by this. That said, there is reason to believe that among that small group, voters of color are going to be disproportionately burdened by this policy because Black and Hispanic voters are simply less likely to have an ID than white voters. Another issue in the past is that election poll workers have had a lot of discretion in how they apply these rules. So, for example, in the past, voters of color have been asked for more stringent identification than other voters. So I think it's important to keep in mind that even if these laws don't have a huge effect on overall turnout, the costs borne are not going to be borne equally by different groups. And on a case-by-case basis, this could be an added requirement and an added hurdle for people to jump through. That said, it's interesting that it's widely popular, and I'm sure this is going to continue to be a hot-button issue at the state level.
Always interesting, and love getting the actual data behind, as you said, what some people are saying. Kabir Khanna, thank you.
Thanks, Lana.